with the Actors and Writers Workshop back in the 1960s in Atlanta. Down the street from their house where that happened was a place called the Old New York Bookstore. And it was a huge Victorian mansion on Juniper Street in Atlanta. And it was every room in this giant Victorian mansion had each room was its own like card catalog. This is the mystery room, this is the poetry room, this is the literature room, and it was 3 stories. So 2 of those stories, every room had books in it, and the guy who owned the place lived on the 3rd floor. And man, I would go there every time I was at the workshop. When I was done there, I would walk down the street and stay at that bookstore until the guy threw me out, or I had to go home, or my parents would kill me. I mean, it was just it was the coolest place ever, and it was organized. I would say roughly the way you would organize a whole bunch of dice. He just threw the books out, and where they tumbled around, wherever they landed, that's where their home was. So yes, that bookstore is the origin maybe of the old Juniper Bookshop in Enigma, Georgia. So yes, that's the answer to that.
And in terms of how your character, introduce us, if you would, to your lead protagonist, Madeline Brimley here,
Madeline Brimley
walks in, and yeah, how we go from there.
So, can I just say, as a preface to that, that's the reason for writing as P.J. Nelson instead of as Philip DePoy. Philip DePoy, I'm sure you know this, but some people might not. In the mystery world, we're divided into 2 basic genres, hard-boiled and cozy. Hard-boiled is like Mickey Spillane. The blood gushed out of him and he fell backward dead on the barroom floor in a puddle of, that's hardcore. Cozy is Miss Marple wakes up in the middle of the night and says, "The Vicar," and then goes and makes tea. So, they're 2 quite different genres in the mystery world. All the other books in the mystery world were considered more on the hard-boiled side, although they were hard-boiled light, kind of. And these old Juniper Bookshop stories are all decidedly in the cozy realm. So the thought was that it would be better to write under a cozier name than my own. So PJ are my initials, and Nelson is believe it or not, my wife's middle name. So that's where the pseudonym comes from. And the character of Madeline Brimley is about 20 different actors I know, women who have reached a certain age in their theatrical career where they're too old to be the ingenue anymore and too young to be the grandmother or the mother character. So she had a lot of work. She worked in New York and she worked in Atlanta a lot, but she just kind of hit that thing that ask any actor who's a woman who has reached a certain age, if that hasn't happened to them. There aren't that many roles for women in their later 30s to later 40s. So she didn't quite know what to do, and then kind of out of the blue, her favorite aunt, who was also an actor, died and left her this bookshop. So it seemed like a good retirement plan, or at least an escape plan, to get out of Atlanta for a little while, go back to Enigma, Georgia, where she was born, but hasn't been back since she was in high school, and at least take over the bookstore for a while until she figures out what else to do with her life, or until she gets to be 50 and can play the grandmother now. So that's how she gets there. That's how she gets to Enigma. And the character is really, despite the fact that the character is a woman who's much younger than I am and also much more like, a woman than I am, is really easy to write. I'm not sure why, except most of my best friends are women. I've known a billion actors who are women. I'm married to my wife Lee is an actor and a playwright. So it's just really channeling all these people that I know and love. And I'm a little embarrassed at how easy it is to write from my version or my imagination of a female perspective. A lot of the world plots hinge on a return to home, and this is her return to home. I think she's there on her first day, and the gazebo in her backyard is on fire, and she has to call. In the backyard of the bookshop is on fire, so she has to call the fire department, and the fire department guys think that she set the fire herself for various reasons. Then she starts getting threatening phone calls saying, if you don't leave, we're going to burn down your house next. We're going to burn down the shop, and we're going to have you in it, and you're going to blah. And she just kind of was going, what the hell? I just came back home because I didn't really know what else to do. Why are you doing this to me? And I think we're a longer way into it than we usually are in a mystery. Her beloved assistant at the bookshop, Tandy, is murdered and is found dead on the floor, and the house is on fire. So we figure that the person has made good on his threat in the phone calls and thought that this Tandy kid was Madeline, the main character. Just set the house on fire, killed this person, and so then Madeline wants to find out how that happened, why it happened, who did it, that sort of thing, and that launches her off into the investigation because it's personal. It's a person that she knows, and this Tandy character. This was a smart thing that actually someone else suggested. Get to know that character pretty well before you kill her off, so that the reader, you hope, goes, oh no, not her, and really want you to find out who killed this person because she's incredibly lovable. The main supporting characters are her dead aunt's best friend, Dr. Philomena Waldrop, who's the head of the psychology department at the small college in this town. The Episcopal priest who lives across the street, whose church is across the street, the Reverend Gloria Coleman, and a kid that she used to babysit for when she was in high school, living there in Enigma, is now in the first book, he's the deputy and eventually becomes the sheriff of the town. So those are the supporting characters. And those guys and the ethos of that town, Enigma, which is a real town in Georgia, is actually an Enigma, Georgia. In the 1980s, I was the writer in residence for the Georgia Council for the Arts. And what that meant was they sent me on a little archly referred to as missionary work. I would go and live in Tifton and Irwinville and these small little towns, mostly in South Georgia, for half a year, and write and teach creative writing, usually at some school. It could be an elementary school or a college or a high school, and then the people in those classes would get to see what I was writing, what I was working on. And so they would see what an actual working writer does every day. And I loved it. I did maybe 15 or 16 of those residencies throughout the course of the 80s and into the 90s. And the first one was in Tifton, Georgia, which is about 20 minutes from Enigma, where the Juniper Bookshop series takes place. And so I met all those people. Everybody in the book is somebody I met there, a version of people that I met there. And I really got to be friends with a lot of them. Still know some of them after 40 years. I just really engaged with all the stuff about small towns, including, we talked before about you go to Appalachia and people are really reserved and they don't want to talk to you at first, and it takes a while to crack them open. It's a little bit different in South Georgia. There's a veneer. Oh, y'all come on in, have some. I got some collards cooking right now. You can have some greens with it. And that's the first thing you meet. Then the second thing you meet is almost always gossip or religion. And then the third thing you meet is the real person who has real life trauma and real life experiences and joys and sorrows and stuff like anybody else. But there are those layers in a small town, or in my experience in these small towns, on top of who the person really is. So to me, that makes interesting characters. The characters are multi-layer, multifaceted. You know, this is the thing that you worry about in Miss Marple books. You don't want to be around Miss Marple for very long, because if you are, you run the risk of being the murder victim. You know, I don't know how many Miss Marple books there are, but somebody is dead in every one of them. And most of them are in little villages, either in St. Mary Mead, where Miss Marple lives, or in little villages close around whenever Miss Marple visits. So the thing about a cozy series like that is, and it's a small town, by and by, I'm going to end up killing everybody else in the town off, you know, if I don't watch out. So I realized I would have to expand a little bit to maybe the next town over for one of them.
Please.
No, I'm done.
I insist.
Okay, but the reason for investigating the murders that happen around her is always personal. Like in every event, she's not just, oh, there's an interesting murder that happened, I think I'll help the police figure it out. It's always somebody she knows and cares about in one way or another. And so her reason for wanting to do it will always be, in all the books, a personal reason and a personal motivation.
So if you were to, excuse me, delve a little bit more into All My Bones, where in the second story, do we meet her basically in terms of Gloria and, you know, being arrested for murder? Catch us up a little bit, if you would, into what.
Right. So in All My Bones, she's kind of settled nicely into her life in a small town. She's still trying to figure out exactly what she's going to do, but she's lived there for a while, and she's gotten to be good friends with Gloria Coleman, who's the Episcopal priest who lives across the way. And they're just talking one morning, and they decide they want to. There's a nice garden in the back of the house that's got a gazebo, and it's got food, but it's got a lot of nice flowers and azaleas, and there's a bunch of juniper growing around the gazebo. But the front of the house looks like crap, and that was on purpose. Her aunt decided that people wouldn't take it seriously as a real, you know, hardcore bookshop if it looked fruity out front, if it looked like a tourist attraction rather than, you know, an abandoned mansion where you could find books. So they decide that at least they could beautify the house a little bit by planting some azaleas in front of the porch. So they go out to start that. They start digging. The ground is harder than they anticipated, although that's Georgia, red clay. And then they realize there's some concrete involved, and then they find bones, human bones. Hence the name of the book, All My Bones. And they shortly discover that it's the bones of one of the richest women in town. She's been missing for 6 months, and nobody's reported her because nobody likes her. Nobody has said anything. Even her sister, who is a character in the first book, her sister had a big fight with her and didn't report her missing either. But now that she's been found dead, she blames Gloria Coleman, the Episcopal priest, because she saw Gloria and her sister having arguments about church stuff. And so Gloria, because this rich woman fingers her and says it's her, she's the one who did it, she's got a lot of influence with the local law enforcement, and they arrest Gloria with no evidence whatsoever. So Madeline, that's the personal involvement in this one. Madeline has to prove that her friend didn't do it. So that's the investigation proceeds from there. And the investigation proceeds for half the book with that character, Gloria, in jail. So she depends on her other close friend, her pseudo-aunt, fake aunt, Philomena Waldrop. The original Grimm's Fairy Tales figures heavily in the, and it would be worth, it depends on who I did online research, which is about as reliable as, you might expect. But one of the auction houses had recently sold one of those books for like $750,000. I doubt that's accurate, but it was a very valuable book, and its value and its provenance figure heavily in the plot of the second book. And that comes out of a series of short stories that I wrote that are, I kid you not, when I did folklore research in Appalachia in the early 70s, I ran into a guy who told me a bunch of Grimm fairy tales but they were different, slightly different, altered, and he said his claim was that his mother had written all those stories, which of course I knew wasn't the case, and they were just enough different that clearly his mother had like taken some of the harsher elements of Grimm stories, which are like unbelievably brutal. You probably know the thing of like with who is it that has the glass slipper? The Cinderella, and the sisters are trying to fit their foot into the glass slipper, and it doesn't, so they cut their toes off so that their foot will fit in the glass slipper, and the prince knows that's not Cinderella because there's blood in the shoe. Well, you don't get that out of Disney. Apparently this guy's mother had decided to nicen up the stories a little bit when he was listening to them as a child. So anyway, because had kind of recorded his stories and was working on my own version of Grimm fairy tales with slightly nicer endings, at the same time I was working on this on All My Bones. So the research into those two worlds collided a little bit.